Lego.
Currently, it was on November 11th in the year 1778 that Patriot Colonel Ichabod Alden refuses to believe intelligence about an approaching hostile force. As a result, a combined force of Loyalists and Native Americans attacking in the snow captured more than 70 prisoners. 40 patriots, including Alden, also continued their eternity in what is known today as the Cherry Valley Massacre. The attack took place east of Cooperstown, New York. It is now Otsego County. Alden was a New Englander from Duxbury, Massachusetts, who began his military career in the Plymouth Militia before serving in the 25th Continental Regiment during the siege of Boston that followed the Battle of Lexington and Concord in 1775. Alden was then sent to command the 7th Massachusetts Regiment in Cherry Valley, New York, where he was strategically out of his depth in a state deeply divided between Loyalists and Patriots, and with a significant Native American military presence. Alden ignored warnings that local natives were planning an attack and left the 200 to 300 men stationed to defend Cherry Valley ill-prepared for the eventual arrival of 600 Iroquois under the adept command of Chief Joseph Brant, and 200 men, known as Butler's Rangers, under the command of Loyalist Major Walter Butler. Ironically, on November 11th in 1775, exactly 3 years before this so-called massacre executed by aggrieved Iroquois, the Continental Congress had engaged the missionary Samuel Kirkland to spread the gospel amongst the Indians and confirm their affection to the United Colonies, thereby preserving their friendship and neutrality. On November 11th in 1831, the awesome Nat Turner continued his eternity in Virginia. Nat Turner was an enslaved man, and he was also an educated minister. He believed that he was chosen by God to lead his people out of the unjust practice called slavery. On August 21st in 1831, he initiated his uprising by attacking Joseph Travis, his owner, and Travis's family. As a result, Travis and the Travis family continued their eternity. With 7 followers, Turner set off across the countryside, hoping to rally hundreds of enslaved people to join his insurrection. Turner planned to capture the county armory at Jerusalem, Virginia, and then march 30 miles to Dismal Swamp, where his rebels would be able to elude their pursuers. During the next 2 days and nights, Turner and 75 followers rampaged through Southampton County. As a result, about 60 white people continued their eternity. Locals resisted the rebels, and then the state militia, consisting of some 3,000 men, crushed the rebellion. Only a few miles from Jerusalem, Turner and all his followers were dispersed, captured, or continued their eternity. In the aftermath of the rebellion, many innocent African Americans were lynched, though many of them had not participated in the revolt. Turner himself was not captured until the end of October, and after confessing without regret to his role in the bloodshed, he was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. On November 11th, Nat Turner was hanged in Jerusalem and continued his eternity. As the progeny of the Black Americans in our awesome country that suffered through the unjust practice of slavery, I can't help but thank Nat Turner for his awesome courage. It's people like Boudica, Joan of Arc, Nat Turner, Pancho Villa, who made a difference in this world, who had the courage to stand up and fight unjust practices and propagate human unity. Nat Turner's rebellion was the largest revolt of enslaved people in U.S. history and led to a new wave of oppressive legislation prohibiting the movement, assembly, and education of enslaved people. It was November 11th in the year 1921, exactly 3 years after the end of World War I, that the tomb of the unknown soldier is dedicated at Arlington Cemetery in Virginia during an Armistice Day ceremony presided over by our 29th President, Warren G. Harding. Two days prior, an unknown American soldier who had fallen somewhere on a World War I battlefield arrived at the nation's capital from a military cemetery in France. On Armistice Day, in the presence of President Harding and other government, military, and international dignitaries, the unknown soldier was buried with highest honors beside the Memorial Amphitheater. As the soldier's earthly remains were lowered into the ground, a 2-inch layer of soil, bought from France, was placed below his coffin so that his earthly remains might rest forever atop the earth on which he continued his eternity. The tomb of the unknown soldier is considered the most hallowed grave at Arlington Cemetery, America's most sacred military cemetery. The tombstone itself, designed by sculptor Thomas Hudson Jones, was not completed until 1932 when it was unveiled bearing the description, quote, "Here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God," unquote. The World War I unknown was later joined by the unidentified remains of soldiers from America's other major 20th century wars, and the tomb was put under permanent guard by special military sentinels. In 1998, a Vietnam War unknown who was buried at the tomb for 14 years was disinterred from the tomb after DNA testing indicated his identity. The earthly remains of Air Force Lieutenant Michael Blassie was returned to his hometown of St. Louis, Missouri, and was buried with military honors, including, at the ceremony, an F-15 jet missing man flyover and a lone bugler sounding taps.